In Active Directory domain services, there are many different types of objects that you would be responsible for managing. One of those types of objects is the computer object. Now, a computer, similar to a user account, is a security principle. In other words, we talked about the user account being the interface between Active Directory and a physical person, an actual human being. Well, the computer account is the interface between Active Directory and an actual physical computer. Now, to demonstrate a little bit about computer objects, I want to jump into one of my domain controllers. So I'm going to go over to DC1. Here in the Server Manager on DC1, let's go up to the Tools menu, and I'm going to jump down to Active Directory Users and Computers. Here in Active Directory Users and Computers, you'll see I have my domain, and if I expand that, there are a couple of containers that by default automatically get computer accounts. One container would be the computers container. That seems fairly obvious. And if I click on it, hey, look at that, it's blank. Why is it blank? Well, the reason is because right now, I only have 3 computers that are participating in this domain. And all 3 of those computers happen to be domain controllers. So the computers container here is for non-domain controller computers, member servers, or client machines. The second container that automatically would, by default, hold computer accounts would be the domain controllers container. And if I click on that, this is where we can see the 3 computers that I currently have running as part of this domain that I'm working in. We have DC1, 2, and 3. And we can see that they're all computer accounts. We can see that it tells us what type of domain controller they are. The first 2 are global catalog servers. The third one is a read-only domain controller. Now, if I wanted to create a computer account, it's a little bit different than when we talk about creating users or groups. It's not typical, although something we can do, it's not typical to right-click on a container and go to New and select Computer, right? I could do this. As you can see, I'm doing it right now. And I could give this computer a name, right? Client 1, and click OK. What would be more typical would be if I went to Client 1, which I do have a computer in my system. It's the Windows 10 computer, and it's named Client 1. If I were to go through the process of having that computer join the domain, as part of that process, a computer account would be created. And that's part of why you need to give credentials when you are joining the domain. You need to have credentials, well, first of all, to be allowed to join the domain, but 2, to be able to create the computer account in the domain. Now, if I were to join the domain and add the computer account that way, this is where you would find it. You would find it in the computers container. But let's say that Client 1 was going to be a client that was used in the customer service department. Well, what some environments choose to do, not all, some will keep it simple and they'll all be in the computers and domain controllers container, and that's it. But some will go to the customer service organizational unit here, and they will then further break this down into new containers. I don't want you to worry too much about these containers that I'm creating. I'm going to actually go over that in another video, but I'm going to just call it users, and then I'm going to create another container called computers. So the first thing is I might take all of my users and put them in the users container. All right. Again, don't worry too much about exactly what I'm doing there. I actually show how to do that in the videos where I teach about user management, things like that. But then I have my computers container inside of customer service, and that might be where I want that account to be. So I'm just literally going to click and drag. And now Client 1 exists over here. And now if I were to go ahead and join the domain from the computer that has the name Client 1, it would go ahead and connect with this particular computer account. Now, I will also add that sometimes the computer's container, they will even go a step further and do something like this. Desktops and laptops. Sometimes the words might be different. It might be something like in-house, mobile, something like that. But again, maybe Client 1. It's a desktop computer, so we put it in there. Now, beyond this, there's not a whole lot when it comes to computer account management. I mean, there are some advanced, sophisticated things that we can do when you get into serious enterprise networking. But for the most part, it's just a matter of either doing what's called pre-staging the user account, like you create them before they join the domain, or just allow them to be created as part of joining the domain. And sometimes we'll go ahead and let them all be created by joining the domain, and then you go to the computers container and you see a big long list here, and then you just start dragging and dropping and moving them where they belong. That's another option. Or, like I said, we can pre-stage them in the locations that we want. Now, there is one other thing to understand about computer accounts, and that is that technically it is still a security principle, and it does still authenticate. In other words, the computer itself does authenticate with a password every time the user logs on. Now, you don't ever see that password or enter that password, but it does happen, okay? It has what's called a secure channel. If that secure channel were to get messed up for some reason, what you would need to do is here in Active Directory, you would want to right-click on the account and reset the account. Okay, it's almost kind of like with a user, how you would reset password. You would reset the account, and when you reset that account, you could then, on the client end, essentially, basically, you have to remove it from the domain and then rejoin the domain, but it will reconnect and reestablish a new secure channel. All right, so again, just keep in mind, computer accounts do exist. They do have a security role to play. They do represent an actual computer that's on your network. And so you're going to want to be familiar with what those objects are when you see them on your network.